My grandmother was a very inspirational person in my life. Given her circumstances, where she came from, she, along with my actual mother, inspired me in so many ways. It actually is part of the reason I'm choosing the career field that I'm in. Um, Growing up, she wasn't as fortunate. She grew up in a house full of siblings. She had 5 sisters, 3 brothers, and along with her sisters came children. She grew up in New York. She had an alcoholic father, and that still to this day impacts her. She would always tell me the different things and different stories that would transpire growing up, and it kind of made her the parent that she is today. I grew up with my grandmother, me and my 3 siblings. It was a very extraordinary childhood. It was my grandmother, my grandfather before he passed away. She would always tell us that she pays the cost to be the boss, because so many of us, it would always just be so chaotic at times, and she would be the one to, maintain the household. Like I said, she grew up in New York with 5 siblings. Growing up, she would tell me stories about how they had to farm their own food. They had their own farm with chickens, pigs. Sometimes they would go fishing for dinner, and it was actually ironic because you would think that my grandmother grew up in the South based off of how she was raised, but really it was her parents that grew up in the South. I can't remember what part of Georgia she said they were from. But that was just a little background about my mother, about my grandmother. She definitely inspired me. Right after high school, she graduated at the age of 17. She went to the military. She went to the military and became a nurse, a surgical nurse, and she would perform surgeries, do those sorts of things. And it was just so ironic, the story she would tell me, because she's about maybe 4'8", and she's so small but so powerful, and she's just very inspiring. When she went to the military, that is when she met her husband. Well, didn't know it was going to be her husband, but she met her husband, my granddad. She would always tell me about how she would give him such a hard time just to, basically go on a date. Long story short, they ended up getting married. They were stationed. First, they went to Germany. When they went to Germany, they was there for a few years, and then they relocated to Texas. San Antonio, Texas. That's where my mom was conceived and born. She was there for a few years. Shortly after, her mom passed away. Her mom passed away from a drunk driver. She had to adopt some of her nephews because her mom was still raising them. So she adopted some of her nephews, 2 of them to be exact. She raised them. They were in Texas for a little while with her. Then that's when she located to Georgia. Finally, when she came to Georgia, her sister and brother, which was her nephew's mom and uncle, they were killed in a car accident. Shortly after, they continued their life in Georgia. I was born. My mom had me at a very young age. She had me at the age of 15. Along with that, my granddad, I don't want to say that was the cause of it, but my mom was a bit of a troubled child. Shortly after, my granddad ended up having a stroke, which caused him, of course, and my grandmother to be discharged from the military. She began to take care of my grandfather, being that he was considered handicapped because the left side of his body was paralyzed. Shortly after being in Georgia for so long, her dad, like I said, he was an alcoholic. He relocated to Georgia. He later died. And she really continued her life. She began working at the Postal Service. Her brother actually was framed for murder. And in that sense, he was hanging with the wrong crowd. It was actually his best friend who got killed. It was like a mob type thing where if he told, he was going to be killed, and so was his family. So he is currently serving a life sentence. I actually don't know where he's located. I've actually talked to him before. He sent me gifts for my birthday over the years, but I've never met him in person. I have pictures, of course. So along with all of the traumatic things, my grandmother became very weary. I literally watched her change as I grew up. She was such this powerful, fun, loving woman to be around. She is still loving till this day, but you see a difference in her, and the way she has handled the losses in her life is very impressive. I know it's a lot. I recently had a loved one who was taken from me, and I can only salute my grandmother. Shortly after, my granddad passed away, so it was just me, my siblings, my mom, and my uncle. She retired from the military. She began her own business along with real estate. She was thriving with that. Her business is amazing. She quit real estate after a couple of years. She didn't really do it for that long. And she just retired. She is just running her own business. Her only son recently just had around that time, had his first son. Very exciting. We would just reminisce about, you know, how things would be with my family if my grandfather was here. It was pretty much life-changing. A lot of things that happened was life-changing. Shortly after my grandmother retired, she was no longer doing real estate. She actually kind of cut down on her business actually as well. Her first son, her only son, his firstborn, was killed in a car accident. That was the recent loss that I was referring to. He was 2 years of age. And that was the most traumatic thing we've ever experienced in our lives as a family. And I recently, and this is what made me do the assignment on her, we recently had an discussion about how we were handling things. My grandmother actually battled with depression. I honestly didn't know that years ago she had a suicide attempt, and I could just think about how could someone be so strong and just battling so many things behind closed doors. And she's very empowering and very inspirational once again. And my grandmother, Gloria Strickland, is a very, like I said, she's very inspirational to me, and I am very grateful for her because I would not be where I am without her. Thank you.